now that the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our Rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Let your little light shine, shine, shine. Let your little light shine, oh my Lord. There might be someone down in the valley trying to get home. Sing that with me. Let your little light shine, shine, shine. Let your little light shine, oh my Lord. There might be someone down in the valley trying to get home. When God created the world, the first thing he said was, let there be light. He separated the light from the darkness. He called it good. Early modern people wrote a lot about the difference between light and dark, between day and night. Nighttime is a fearful time. When you can't see, you can't be seen. It's pretty dangerous. It can be pretty scary. Stuff happens in the night. It's hard to get around. It's hard to know what you're doing. If church right now were completely dark, if it were midnight, and there were no lights, and I struck one match, or I lit one tiny birthday candle, the light from that tiny little candle would be visible to every single person in the room. That's so powerful. One little light. So when Jesus says, you are the light of the world, he's not messing around. Similarly, he says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, salt is an interesting substance. It's made up of two things that you would never, ever eat. It's made out of sodium, which I remember my high school chemistry teacher dumped some water on a piece of sodium, and we watched it explode and burn, and I thought, woo! And it's made of chlorine, which I have been instructed my whole life to never drink. These two things are dangerous and toxic to us, but when you put them together, they become essential. It's the only rock that we eat. Our bodies contain about 250 grams of salt. It's like 3 salt shakers worth of salt. We need it to live. Mammals need it to live. It is so elemental, it is so important, it is so foundational. It preserves things. It preserves food. It preserves meat and vegetables and grains. For most of the history of humanity, there was no refrigeration, but there was pickling. And there was fermentation. And that all happened because of salt. Faithful Jewish people on the Sabbath eat bread, a symbol of God's promise of food, dipped in salt, a symbol of the preservation of God's covenant with God's people, God's expression of love toward us, and our commitment of love towards God. What could be more foundational, more elemental? What could be both air and earth than light and salt? So I find it really weird that Jesus says, if salt loses its saltiness, it's not good for anything. And I think, wait a minute, Jesus, that's not even possible. Salt can't not be salt, any more than light can't not be light. What's going on? I think we get a clue about what Jesus is talking about the ridiculous notion when salt loses its saltiness. How could such a thing be? When salt loses its saltiness, it isn't itself anymore. It's something else. If you put light under a bushel basket, it's not even light anymore. It's no longer doing its job. think our readings today have something to say about authenticity and inauthenticity, about being real, about being fake. Isaiah has a lot to say to the people of Israel about being a fake. Now, I think many of us have experienced in our professional lives and our personal lives that sort of feeling of fake it till you make it. That feeling of imposter syndrome. Those of us who are in various professions, remember the first time I walked in front of a choir when I was in my master's program for conducting, and I thought, oh my God, I have no business being up here. But what can I do? We've got 90 minutes. We better fill the time. So you can imagine how I felt the first time I got up to preach a sermon. Oh my God, we've got 90 minutes. That's not quite the same thing. This is more like if you've been faking it for a while and you start to believe your own garbage, your own lie about yourself. This is when you start to say that maybe I'm a little bit cooler than I am. Maybe I'm a little bit better than everybody else in the world. I don't mean like more skilled, I mean like maybe a better person, a better individual. Maybe it means, you know, God, I've been putting out my good stuff. I've been giving you the good. Where's mine? You know, I come to church, I pray, tithe, build houses for Habitat. So I put my bit out there, God, and now you need to scratch my back. This for that, God, quid pro quo. And Isaiah says, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. One story of faking it. Or we think that if we do our religion just right, that God's going to turn around and give us the things that we deserve. And that's not how any of this works. I'm going to come back to that in a second, because there's another story of inauthenticity in our scripture reading this morning. What we don't hear from Paul today in his letter to the good people of Corinth, the church of Corinth, in Greek, the ecclesia, a word better translated as community. Not even as structured, not even as developed as something like we have, like a church. It's just a group of people that are having some trouble getting along. If you doubt that, go back and read the first part of this letter, and he says, what's going on, Chloe, with your people? Get it together. And then he says, these are my credentials. This is why it's valid for me to tell you what I'm telling you. And then he kind of confesses. It's a little bit buried in there. You don't quite see the full story. But what we don't know is that Paul has just been on a preaching tour of Athens. Now let's talk about Paul for a second. He is not suave. He is not particularly good looking. He's pretty short. He's a little rough around the edges. But he went to the first century version of Palestinian of Men's Warehouse, got himself a nice suit. He put together his TED Talk. He had his slide deck ready. And the people in Athens are like, they threw him out. He just didn't have that kind of polish that they were looking for in a place as cosmopolitan and learned as Athens. Sort of like the San Francisco of its day. And he probably is feeling a little bit kicked in the rump about that. And so he tells his people, look, I'm not any of those things. I'm not smooth, I'm not suave, I'm not polished, I'm just this guy. But here's what I do have, he says, I have my experience of who Jesus is. I've experienced what it means to be loved. I've experienced what it means to be touched so completely by God that I can never go back. He's taken that moment in his life, we read about it a few weeks ago, and he circled it with big red magic marker. He said, here is the point at which everything changed, and I can't go back. He says, where's the point for you? It It's nothing you can get from a fancy TED Talk. It's nothing you can get even from a good 90-minute sermon. It's something that comes in your own life that you know in your spirit, he says. You know inside of you. Your whole being knows it. That, for Paul, is the point of authenticity. That is the point of us coming together. The rituals, all of the stuff that we do, all of the things that I love, and I love it dearly, as you know. I love our sacraments, I love our building, I love all of it. But all of that is an outward expression of what's happening inside. That's the good. Paul says that's what we're after. All this other stuff, just dressing. You're the salt of the earth. You are the basic element that God needs. So here's what God doesn't need. He doesn't need us to fake it. He needs us to be who we are. Thank God. Because if I had to be different than I am, I just couldn't even do it. If I had to be someone else, if I had to be more polished version, if I had to be someone who was more generous in my heart, who was nicer, if I had to be someone who could do it better, if I had to be someone who'd written more scholarly papers or done any of those other things, well, I'd be out. I kind of appreciate that Jesus says, I didn't come here to change the law, I came to fulfill it. And then he says, kind of in this other way, none of us really are qualified to fulfill the law. There's a lot of it. Because honestly, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself, well, let me tell you something, that is well beyond my capacity all by myself. I don't have it in me. There are neighbors that, let me tell you with full honesty, I do not love as much as I love myself. If I had to do that all by myself, if I had to do that all on my own, there's no way. But Jesus came to fulfill the law. Through Christ, through my real experience of Christ, that's where I can be the full and authentic person that I am. That's where I can be the really salty individual that God made me to be. You, my friends, are the salt of the earth. You and you and you and you. And God made you exactly as you are. With all the good, with all the complicated. You're the one that God wanted. Not some fancier version. Not some buffed up, faked up version. But you. And God doesn't want all your religious piety for its own sake. Now, if that's the expression of how you worship and know God, if that's the expression of how you experience God, that is glorious. That is wonderful. And our community is also the salt of the earth. It's not just writing to us as individuals, but as a whole community. We together are that salt. God made us, all of us, everyone together here, as the element that God needs, that fundamental thing. It's so funny because salt is made up of things that don't seem to go together, sodium and chloride. And when we put us all together, we become an essential mineral needed to preserve and carry out God's work in the world. More than that. Each one of us has our own red magic marker moments. Those times in our lives when we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God's hand has been at work, that God's Spirit has moved in our lives. These times when our reason was not enough, that those experiences changed us forever. Example. Graduated from seminary, 3 years, very fancy, highly privileged, highly regarded Ivy League University, and I came out feeling dumber than when I'd gone in. I felt less qualified to do anything than before I started. It was a dark moment. It was no prospects, no job, just hanging out, wondering what to do next. Can't go back, can't go forward. I was stuck. And then God moved through the heart of someone who had some influence, and she said, come to my office, and she started cold calling people on my behalf. And one of those cold calls turned into a job, and that job turned into the fullness of my vocation. Fast forward 5 years, stuck again. What do? Can't go forward, can't go backward. And I get a call from the canon for Transitions Ministry. She said, have you thought about that little church in Woodbury? And the day I had my first call, my first not very functional Skype meeting with your discernment committee, I had the same feeling I've had when I fall in love. You just know when you know. Red magic marker. Where are your red magic marker moments? Where are the moments where you knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, can't go backward, can't go forward, enter God? Those moments are the source of your authenticity. Those moments in our congregation are the source of our authenticity. They are the place from which we derive our mission. And as we understand what our mission is, then we hold up that light for other people. And we say, yeah, I know what it means when you can't go forward, you can't go backward. What's so beautiful about being this ecclesia, about being this community, about being this church, is that we get the opportunity to be the hands and feet and heart of Jesus in the world. We get the opportunity to be that person who is the agent for someone else's transformation by listening to where God is, by recognizing those red magic marker moments in our own lives and seeing that we can be the way that God does that for someone else. And then we hold up our light so that other people can know this is a safe place. This is a place where you can come and be transformed. Where you can come and know Jesus in a new way. Where you can come and you don't have to be anything other than who you are. That your most elemental self, your salt is enough. Your salt is needed. That God's word is preserved through us. Let your little light shine, shine, shine. Let your little light shine, oh my Lord. There might be someone down in the valley trying to get